For those of us who understand the profound impact of the arts, we recognize the power of visual literacy. But what if we could harness that power to transform corporate environments, enhancing safety and performance in ways they've never imagined? The art of seeing isn't just about appreciating beauty. It's about creating real-world change where it's least expected. This is our chance to bridge the gap between the arts and industry, proving the value we know exists. Stay tuned. Before we begin today's episode, I want to introduce you to our sponsor, the Institute for Arts Impact. If you're an arts leader striving to increase relevance, resources, and revenue, you understand the challenge of articulating your value in a way that resonates deeply with stakeholders. I'm thrilled to share news about the Institute's upcoming Collaborative Arts Impact Initiative launching this fall. This groundbreaking pilot project is set to equip nonprofit arts organizations with cutting-edge customer impact management software, enabling them to measure and communicate the public value of the arts in real time. Imagine providing your funders and stakeholders with evidence-based advocacy, highlighting your work's social and economic impact using new language for return on art, or ROA. This initiative isn't just progress, it's a revolution in demonstrating art's public value. Elevating the arts through measurable outcomes is not just part of the Institute's mission, it's what drives them. If you're ready to be at the forefront of tracking your ROA, reach out to info@instituteforartsimpact.com to learn more. And now, let's get back to Arts Redefined. Hey there, it's Angela. How can the arts become the key to transforming corporate America's approach to safety and performance? If you've ever struggled to communicate the powerful impact of your programming to the business world, this episode is a must listen. Today, I'm joined by Doug Ponsler, chairman of the Center for Visual Expertise. He's a business leader with no prior background in art who is now championing the idea that the art of seeing art can prevent workplace hazards. Doug's journey from industry executive to arts advocate offers a blueprint for how we, as arts leaders, can break through the corporate wall and demonstrate the tangible benefits of visual literacy in the workplace. Tune in to learn how Doug is using art to reshape safety protocols and how you can leverage similar strategies to elevate the relevance of your work in the corporate sphere. This is Arts Redefined. Hi, Doug. How are you?
I am good, Angela. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today. So I normally don't do this, but I'm going to do this for this sake because I think it's interesting for the listeners to understand a little bit about your background. Well, currently you are chairman of the Center for Visual Expertise, or COVE, which is in conjunction with the Toledo Museum of Art. Mm-hmm. But you've got background in accounting, finance, production, and inventory control, factory management leadership. At Owens Corning, you were in operations, sustainability. You were a member of the National Safety Council Board of Directors and chair of the Campbell Institute at the National Safety Council, and a known thought leader in workplace safety. But we're here today to talk about the art of seeing art.
That's right. It's a little odd. It's a little odd combination, but it worked.
But I love it because when you and I met and spoke a while back, because you know that my whole life revolves around advocating for the importance of the art, of arts, how arts is not an object, it's a mindset. I often talk about how skills that you learn through the arts, whether it's performing arts or visual arts, etc., those skills transcend and are a cross-section to all industries. And so when we met and I learned about COVE, you are living exactly what I preach every day. So can you give me a little bit about your corporate background and how you stumbled into leading COVE and living the art of seeing art in this capacity?
Yeah, I would love to, Angela. I think beginning, kind of with my career and so forth, I spent nearly 40 years in industry with two Fortune 500 companies, the first of which was Eaton for about 23 years or so. And the second was Owens Corning here, headquartered in Toledo, where I'm located, for an additional 13 years or so. And and in that time period with both corporations, I worked with great companies and great people that were all really focused on learning, discovering new things, being innovative, and so forth. So at a very early part of my career, that was something that was prioritized in terms of the expectations for me, but also what I learned generated the most fun and impact when it came to working in business. And it was in 2015, actually, as we sort of leap forward to the connection to the arts. When I was at Owens Corning and I was leading the environmental health and safety function at Owens Corning, we were very, very focused on how do we identify hazards that exist in the workplace instead of just solving them once we had an incident. And, most Fortune 500 companies, large organizations that are safety minded, they are proactive in terms of looking for those things that can hurt and harm people or hurt and harm the environment. And, but we still live in a world that's largely reactive, where something happens, we learn from it as we should, and we go about fixing it so that it won't happen again. And sharing those lessons within the organization and with other companies in many cases, so that for the good of the order, we solve it for people that didn't even have the experience as well. So in 2015, we were looking really hard at how do we continue to advance our ability to see the things that need to be fixed in our organization in order to be able to keep people safe, being able to see the hazards. And I just heard by accident that there was a program that existed at the Toledo Museum of Art called Learning to See. And it was a program that was really directed at art appreciators, docents, art educators that taught people, how do you look at a piece of art and how do you understand, how do you draw meaning from that work of art and perhaps what the artist was trying to convey. And as I shared with you earlier, I do not have a deep, rich art history. In fact, prior to 2015, about the only time that I went to a museum is because there was an event or something that I was attending there. It wasn't to go and appreciate the art. But in 2015, when we heard about this learning to see, what struck me was that if there was something there that could really help us be able to see the reality around us in a different and a more complete way, that could certainly help our ability to see hazards in the workplace. So I connected with the museum. The museum staff came over. A deputy director at the time, who's now the CEO of the museum, Adam Levine, came over to the world headquarters at Owens Corning, and we sat down in a conference room and we talked about the challenges that existed in safety. We talked about what I now knew was visual literacy. Learning to see was really about visual literacy. And we decided that, if there was a way that we could teach visual literacy in an industrial context, then we had the opportunity to leverage these tools that had existed in art education for a long time and be able to improve our ability to be able to see hazards in the workplace, because not only would we open the aperture of being able to see more completely, we would better understand how we interpret those visual stimuli that we collect and how that influences our ability to really understand what it is that we're looking at. And the better we would be at that, then the more credible, the more impactful actions that we could take in order to improve safety in the workplace. And it was that experience from about 2015 until 2018 that really drove this idea that we could be successful in the workplace, applying lessons that were taught in art education And that was the fetus of what developed to be Hope.
Well, what's really interesting in hearing your story is you had to be open-minded to even come across a program that the museum was offering that was really geared toward, as you said, docents or collectors or things like that. How did you make that leap to think, is there something here that we could apply to industry?
Well, I think two things about that. I think number one, part of that goes back again to my history, where very early, in the roles that I was in, and also the companies that I was involved with, there was an expectation that we were looking for innovative and new solutions. So from a very early age and a very early part of my career, that was just part of my makeup. Um, uh, but I think the second thing is that if you look at the state of industry today, um, there's been a lot of things that have been implemented over time in all areas to improve companies' operating performance. And so companies are looking for things that are new and different in order to be able to break through the levels of performance that perhaps we've experienced for some time, and we're struggling to get to that next higher level of performance. That's certainly true in the world of safety. That there's been a long trend of improvement that most companies have realized, and industry in general has realized, over a long period of time. But that improvement curve is kind of flattened out. So, if you're committed to safety and you're really driving, to eliminate risk and improve the well-being of your employees, you're looking for something new and different than what you've seen before. And I think our timing was right in terms of, being able to recognize that this skill, this capability could really make a difference in moving to the next level of performance. And that's been our experience with Cove, not only in the beginning, but also as we sit here, 6.5 years later after our initial launch, in terms of what visual literacy offers to industrial performance.
Well, so you know my involvement with your alma mater, Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. And one of the things that I talk about there and with their arts management program is really how do we better communicate, even in higher ed, that you're not innovative unless you're creative. And we need to infuse some of these practices that we do in the art school or the arts college that we have perhaps in the business school and things like that. But there's still this reluctance to, I think, view artists as entrepreneurs or artists as innovators. But I'm hearing you say that here are these practices and tools that arts education has had for decades, if not a century, on visual literacy. How can organizations better communicate with corporate America on exposing them to perhaps artistic practices or touch on visual literacy maybe a little bit, so we can maybe, as the podcast is, we redefine what art is and how it can impact industry.
Yeah, I think, it begins like most things do with just simply engaging, being able to see past, perhaps the initial hurdle that it would look uh, where the arts would not be relevant, to what we do in industry. And that's one of the things that, we as Cove, we have to do is we have to bring people to this idea that in the arts, there are tools and techniques that help us see the world more completely, interpret the world more accurately. And if we do those two things, we have the opportunity to take action that is most impactful and most meaning. So, when people in industry, they hear that story about what visual literacy offers, they're more likely to be willing to invest some of their time in learning more about, what's the background, what's the tool set, et cetera. So, we've just got to get people over that hump. And one of the ways to do it is to speak in business terms, and that is, what does it mean? What's the benefit for being visually literate? What should we expect from that? And, when our clients and our potential clients hear that story, then they're more open to the idea that there can be something borrowed from art education that can impact us from a business standpoint.
So,
I think
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I think the second thing, Angela, is that, the profile today of competencies that are necessary to be successful in business are competencies that are a little different than what they were 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we talked a lot about, the need for technical kind of proficiency, whether it was computer, whether it was, being able to work on electronics, or mechanical. There was very significant physical and hands-on competencies that were really necessary. Those continue to be necessary, but they're almost table stakes today. And what we see from various studies that have been done by human resource organizations is that what employers are looking for in their people and in the people that they bring into the organization today is more slanted toward, are they really good critical thinkers? Are they really good problem solvers? Are they really good communicators? And those three things alone are what visual literacy is actually, all about. Our ability to more accurately and more completely collect inputs, that we can use to analyze, to draw meaning from, and be able to really understand what the reality is so that we can not only solve the problems that exist, but also we're able to more effectively communicate about what we're seeing so that we can do something about it.
Yeah. And so, thinking of the audience here as leaders in the arts who know the impact, know of visual literacy, know the benefits, the preventative nature that skills that you developed through the arts has. What was it about getting over that hurdle? What business messaging did you hear to get you over the hurdle? And what is that same messaging that you use to get other corporate leaders over the hurdle as well?
Yeah, the things that I heard when we first began to learn about visual literacy connected directly to experiences that I had not only in the workplace, but, in my life. And when we see that same thing being true with the clients that we worked with. There was a number of times when we had an incident occur in the workplace, for example, where I would hear someone say, I've walked by that 1,000 times and I never saw it. I never saw the hazard. I never saw, the situation until the incident called it to my attention. And that's just one example of things that I think we all experience each and every day. It can be as simple as I open the refrigerator door to look for the ketchup and I can't find the ketchup, even though the ketchup's there. It's just maybe in a different bottle or in a different location or something like that. I lay the car keys down somewhere where I normally don't lay the car keys, and now I can't find my car keys. I don't see them, even though they may be out in plain sight. So as we work with clients and their company and the people that work within their organizations, and we start to tell these stories about how we experience life and the relevance of that to being visually literate, people connect to that and they draw meaning from that because they have those very same experiences. So by sharing those stories, we begin to build advocacy. We begin to build interest in, those people that we're talking to about something as sort of strange as coming to an art museum in order to be able to improve their techniques to identify workplace hazards.
So break down a little bit in detail on how does COVE work? So you work with companies. Can you walk me through a little bit of the program and what that entails?
I sure can. Our program is basically made up of two sort of components. One is workshops, where we bring people together, typically in a museum, probably 90% of the time. We conduct our workshops in museums. And in those workshops, we teach what is visual literacy, why does it matter, and how does it connect to the work that we do as individuals in the workplace and in our lives at home. And the tools we teach are tools that are, again, grounded in art education. We have a few that we've developed, through our experience in terms of making that application to workplace. But a big component of what we teach is really around the elements of art and the principles of design, because that's how we can take an environment and we can decompose it in a way that takes what's become familiar to us and we no longer see it to being unfamiliar again, and we begin to see those details. So our workshops are all experience based, using works of art in the galleries of the museums and also classroom activities to be able to teach those three aspects: what visual literacy is, why it matters, and how does it connect to the work that we do. And those workshops are really focused on the individual. As you leave a workshop as an individual, you are ready to practice. You're ready to apply the tools, gain experience, become even more effective at their application because you're using them. And that's what our workshops are all about. We also recognize that most companies, if they're going to undertake a training initiative within their organizations, that they tend to do that through a train the trainer kind of model, where, they have training staffs, they have people that do training, and they need a mechanism in order to be able to deliver it within their organization. So we've designed a licensee program where we license our materials, to the corporation. We train their trainers, and then they're free to go out and train visual literacy, to perhaps thousands of employees that make up that particular organization. But the heart of our training is really through that workshop that we begin with that teaches us what visual literacy is.
So you mentioned about the component of being in the galleries and actually looking at works of art. You're located in Toledo, Ohio. I'm imagining, though, that you're out in the field, that you take this on the road, and do you then go into whichever museum or institution there is in the region of where that company's located?
Yeah, we do. We've been to 20 to 30 museums around the world, actually, teaching visual literacy primarily to organizations that are sort of located, in that location or close to that location. So we come to them. We contract with the museum. We utilize, their assets in our workshop format, and teach away. We do a lot of our workshops in Toledo because that's kind of where our home is. And companies from around the world send people to Toledo to attend these workshops. But we also go to them and go to their place as well. I think one of the more unique experiences that we've had in conducting workshops is we did a workshop for a company that I won't name, but in Orlando, and we used actually one of their parks and the assets within their parks in order to be able to conduct a workshop for their staff located in Orlando. So we can go nearly anywhere if we're in proximity to a museum and be able to execute a workshop. We've also done some in conference sort of environments where there either is not a museum that is close, or that just fit into the overall agenda of our client better. But most of our work is done in museums.
What are some takeaways that you've heard from organizations that have participated in these workshops when they're done? Any surprises that you've heard?
Well, I think, yeah, for sure, because I think there are some individuals when they report to the museum for their workshop experience, they just can't envision, because most of them are like me. They don't hang around museums. So it's hard for them to envision how they're going to be comfortable and how they're going to be able to relate to something that is done in a place that maybe they're just not familiar with at all. And it's surprising that while there might be some anxiousness about that in the beginning, sort of how quickly, they sort of shift gears and really engage, because what they learn is that, they're number one, they're totally separated from their normal work environment. So all those biases and all those things that go along with that, are not there. So they're sort of free to concentrate, on the experience that they're having and the learning that is underway. I think the second thing is I think they're surprised at how easily and quickly they relate to the works of art that exist in a museum, but also that we utilize in order to be able to teach what we do. And they feel intimidated because they don't want to be wrong. But one of the things that they learn fairly quickly is that there's not as much about being wrong as it is what's your interpretation. How does this impact you? What is behind your interpretation based upon the details that you see? And when you're with a group of people and you start to hear various interpretations of what you're looking at, you sort of find out that number one, that sometimes there's not only one way to look at things, and number two, that working as a group, people see things differently, and that adds to the collective conversation. And what a wonderful experience and what a wonderful lesson to take back to the workplace.
Absolutely. Any challenges that have surprised you?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that we have to work to overcome is that there are some that are really after, sort of black and white, step one, step two, step three, sort of thinking, very conventional, sort of process thinkers. And often it's a little bit more of a challenge for them because it is about, what do you see and what's your interpretation of that? And they would rather, just sort of be told the details rather than try to understand them. And because that's how they function best as individuals. They're the minority and they come along because they start to see that they have an opportunity to see things differently. But, they are a bit more of the challenge at times than what others might be. And then I think the other thing that I'm very happy was a surprise to us very early is that these concepts, once they're absorbed, they're relatively simple for people to practice. So, it's one of the things that I'm most proud of is that you can leave one of our workshops and you don't leave with, another 20 lessons to study. You leave with an understanding of what are these tools, and they're relatively simple. And now I've had some practice in applying them because that's part of the workshop. And when I walk out the doors, I'm ready to go. I am ready to see the world differently than what I saw when I walked in the doors 2 days ago.
Do you track it all with your clients, preventative measures that have happened within the workplace because of this new visual literacy? Is there any kind of feedback that they share to say, look, thanks to this program, we've been able to stop or safety hazards have reduced by X amount?
Yeah, we try, particularly for the people that license our materials, we really focus on, okay, what are the metrics that we're going to utilize, to be able to demonstrate that what we're doing here matters in terms of improving performance. And not everyone is good at tracking the leading indicators of performance versus just the lagging indicator of, well, how much profit did we have? How many injuries did we have, et cetera? Those things that are lagging indicators. There are people that are just not mature in tracking the leading indicators. But, the leading indicators in terms of measuring risk, of measuring the number of hazards that we identify, or the number of corrective actions that we put in place, et cetera. We tend to see an improvement level that is somewhere between 35 and 40% in terms of how people are benefiting from, applying and implementing the tools. Some may see a little less than that. We've had many that have seen much more than that. But I would tell you that sort of the zone is about 35 to 40%. There have been detailed studies done in the medical profession on the application of visual literacy, and that 35 to 40% is right in the same zone as what some of the medical studies have indicated that the proficiency of residents and proficiency of doctors in being able to make more observations are in that same zone as well.
And as you know, when we spoke earlier, I've been working on a pilot project in conjunction with Miami University's Arts Management, Arts Entrepreneurship program on how we measure outcomes in the arts. And I'm a firm believer that we need to have data to coincide with stories, especially if we want to get across in the business sector and show how arts and business do intersect. And I've coined a phrase, what's our ROA? What's our return on art? So I'm practicing, Doug, my business communication that we can get across to those that don't, hang out in the halls of galleries of art or performing arts centers, that we can get through and have them understand that these are tools that can apply and be ahead of it. Again, that whole preventative notion, right? We save more. If we spent more in prevention, we would spend less in correction.
Yes, absolutely. We say often that, we never have time to do it sort of right up front, but we've got all the time in the world to fix it later. And that's too often our reality. But I think, the importance of the metrics and the importance of measurements are really twofold. And that is, number one, proving the value of what it is that we're doing. But in particular, during implementation, it's really important to have metrics in place to be able to prove to us that the implementation is also going well. Because sometimes, we don't use metrics for that purpose, and we just wait to see what the end result is, when in fact, we may have had an implementation issue along the way that we could have corrected if we knew at the time that we weren't seeing what we expected to see. So it not only helps our project be executed more effectively, it also gives us the evidence that it's making a difference in what we're doing.
That's really great. Thank you, Doug. And as I see we're coming up on our 30 minutes, I've been ending every conversation with two same questions to each person that I'm with. One is, how do you define art as this is the Arts Redefined podcast? I'm curious how you define art now that you've engaged in this work.
Yeah, that's a good. I've never been asked that, so I'm going to give you a sort of a heartfelt explanation. And to me, art is just simply the expression of someone's idea, someone's thought, something that someone wanted to represent. So it's their expression of that. And in the other side of it, it gives us then the opportunity to draw meaning and interpretation and understanding and potentially have an impact on our lives. It may reinforce a belief that we have. It may create a new belief that we haven't thought about before. Or it may just cause us to go, I don't get it at all, and move on to the next. But it's an expression and it's an understanding.
And as I speak a lot of times to public officials and other business leaders, and I often hear them say, oh, I don't know anything about art. Sure, it's important, but I don't get it. What I want to remind people is that we all innately had probably some of our fondest memories as a child were perhaps surrounded with something with the arts, right? So another universal question is, what color do you love the most and why?
I'm a blue guy, and I don't exactly know the why, but I love the color and the various shades of blue. Not only in the environment, in clothing, I find things that are blue taste good. So I'm just I'm a blue guy.
What,
sort of.
What is blue? What blue food?
Well, sherbet ice cream, blue sherbet ice cream.
Yes.
Berries.
Yes.
Grape jelly that's blue.
Okay.
There's a lot of things that popsicles that are blue. I don't know. There's just something about blue that is really a connecting point for me.
Doug, I will have to say that I've not heard that before about a color tastes good. So every time I see any kind of blue food, I will think of you and smile.
Oh, that's awesome. That is awesome.
Doug, I really appreciate your time. We will include all of your contact information in Cove so anybody who's listening can reach out. I really hope that your program continues to grow because I think the perfect story of what we talk about in the arts to say that arts is a cross section of all industries, and it's where innovation begins. So thank you for your time.
You are welcome, Angela. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.